Hey everyone, George here with Wine Industry Network. Welcome to the opening episode of our 2025 Bold Predictions webinar series. This opening session is one of my favorites. For the last few years, we've brought back the same panel, same moderator, and it's very cool because they get to reflect back on some of the predictions that they've made the prior year. We talk a little bit about what they got right and maybe where they missed the mark and why they think we did that. But more importantly for me anyway, is to get their thoughts again, from their perspective on what they think we can expect as we head into the upcoming year. So I'm super excited about that. And I'm excited for those of you in the audience that are watching with us today. Before we begin, I want to thank Moss Adams. Moss Adams is our 2025 series presenting sponsor. They're a terrific company. They've been a great partner of ours and are just a wonderful business resource for those in the wine industry, whether you're on the winery vineyard side or you're one of our vendors that are joining us today. And they're joined by our 2025 series supporting sponsor, which is Protea Financial Wine Accountants. Again, another company that we've worked with for a number of years, and another terrific business resource for those of us in the wine industry. But before we begin, just a quick reminder is that we pre-record this a couple of days in advance, but all of our presenters are watching this right along with you are. So as you have questions, go ahead and submit those questions via the chat feature, and our presenters will take on those questions as they come in. So please take advantage of that. Our goal is to make these sessions as interactive as possible. So I'm going to let our moderator, Damian Wilson, handle the introductions for our speakers. But for those of you that don't know Damian, Damian is someone that we've also worked with for a number of years. Damian is the Hamill Family Faculty Chair of the wine business at Sonoma State University. And I think Damian just does a terrific job leading this conversation every year. So without further ado, I'm going to let Damian take it from here.
To look forward and rise to the challenges ahead, managing complexity to reveal opportunity requires welcoming change with optimism. It's how Moss Adams uplifts businesses and individuals to strategically plan for and go where they want to be next. Discover how our industry-focused advisory solutions can help elevate your performance upward.
Thanks for the great introduction, George. We're really happy to be here. Hi everyone. Welcome back to this year's edition of Bold Predictions. My name's Damian Wilson. I'm the Hamill Family Chair for the Wine Business Institute at Sonoma State University. And today we're asking 4 fantastic industry experts to make 4 bold predictions about the wine business in 2025. So before I explain more, let me introduce our guest for today. First up, she is president of Domain Estates and previously held leadership roles at Young's and RNDC. She is someone so driven to achieve that the wine business is lucky she didn't turn her hand to NASCAR racing. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Philana Bouvier. Welcome, Philana.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, and wonderful to be here today.
Next member of our Foresight panel is a face of the depletions data provider, SipSource. Owner of his own consultancy and a managing director with Azure Associates, he has more roles than a packet of King's Hawaiian. It's the larger-than-life Mr. Dale Stratton.
Hello, Damian. Hello, everybody, and good morning, fellow panelists. Excited and ready for the robust conversation.
Do you not want to be associated like the roles of the Michelin Man? Kind of less less flattering.
It's going to be one of those mornings, is it?
It's already started. Okay. All right. Next up, he's the senior wine and grape analyst with Terrain, an affiliate of American Ag Credit, and the only other person on this panel with more degrees than a thermometer. He holds a PhD in industry insight. It's Dr. Chris Bitter.
Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining today. It's a pleasure to be here. And I'll just say, Damian, your thermometer must have fewer degrees than mine because I only have 4.
It could do. It could do. I'll have to check that out. Remember, I grew up in Celsius, so this Fahrenheit thing is beyond me, but I'll figure it out all the same. So lastly, and not leastly, he is a research analyst for Rabobank, host of the Liquid Assets podcast, and as our only panelist under 40, he probably thinks Lance's Rosé is a color for interior decorating. It's Mr. Bourcard Nessin.
It's the color of my bedroom, actually. So it's a great color.
See, how tied into the wine industry is that? Lance's Rosé in the bedroom. Well thought out. Okay, so today's discussion is going to break down into 2 parts. In part 1, our panelists will take turns making one bold prediction about the wine business in 2025. Each panelist will have to defend their prediction, and then the group will debate each pick and the implications it could have for wine businesses. Now, in part 2, you'll get to watch our panelists squirm with discomfort as we hold them accountable for last year's predictions and determine how reliable their forecasts really are. Now, to be honest, they actually didn't do that badly, so we're going to be looking forward to hearing how that goes. So to kick things off, let's go back to what we're predicting for this year. Let's start by going over a couple of housekeeping notes before we dive into our predictions, everyone. Firstly, the panelists are monitoring the chat in today's discussion. So if you have questions, please direct them to the chat box and remember to include the @ symbol to the person that you're directing your question. Secondly, to the best of your ability, we ask that you try to keep your questions focused on the content presented during the session. Thirdly, any post deemed to be self-promotional or unrelated to the topic or topics of discussion may be removed by chat moderators, and repeat offenders may be removed from the session. Don't let you be one of them. Number 4, and lastly, this session has been planned to generate discussion on topics that are likely to elicit contrasting views from both the panel members and the audience. Please be respectful of one another, and as such, use this opportunity to explore different considerations that should be the underpinning approach to your search for 2025 insights in the wine business. So try and add to the discussion more than wanting to have the last word. All right, so we've got to that part. Let's get started. So I'm going to start by throwing to you, Dale. Could you please tell us about your bold prediction for 2025, why it's important to the wine industry, and then we'll open things to the group to debate the validity and impact of your prediction. Over to you.
You bet. Thank you, Damien. So my bold prediction is that there will be a significant transaction involving the top 10 wine suppliers that will materially change the structure of the current ranking and some market dynamics. It's very possible that this could be the emergence of a new category aggregator entering the category. And I would argue that Vintage Wine Estates was that previously, and they were playing that role in some ways. Reasons behind this, number one, as I think about it, I would say time. Timing is number 2. And then the third reason for this is really the market landscape. From a time standpoint, we just haven't seen a lot of big activity amongst the top 10 really since 2021. That is when Gallo took on some of Constellation's portfolio. That deal finalized then in January 2021. Of course, it started much earlier than that. And then also later that year, Delicato acquiring Francis Ford Coppola. So that was really the last time we saw something large happen within them. So from a time standpoint, it's been a while since something has happened there. Then number 2 is timing. And I do think I mentioned Vintage Wine Estates, them going through the bankruptcy that they did. That has opened up the marketplace. And realistically, I think that there is room here now for somebody to come in and aggregate. And then from a market landscape standpoint, I see that as twofold. Number 1 is growth is hard right now, and we're all experiencing that. Maybe not the best way, but the fastest way to growth is definitely acquisition. So going out and being able to do some acquisitions at this point in time, I think that market landscape works. And then I would also say we're just seeing a lot of people looking to transition their businesses. So from a market landscape, both how you go get growth and then the opportunity out there to acquire properties and entities and brands is definitely there. So that's my bold prediction, and would love to get input from my fellow panelists on that.
Okay, so we've seen the first shots have been fired for the year. Let's have a chat and see who has something to add about your prediction there, Dale. I'm going to try and be courteous and offer the microphone to Philana as someone who's out there and making sales on a day-to-day basis. How do you see Dale's bold prediction?
I agree with Dale. There is going to be an emergence. I think the price of entry is a lot different. You have a different playing field. The cost to buy into the wine business is also a lot different. Grape prices have declined, so that makes it a lot different. The way we go to market has gone a lot differently. So there is opportunity for someone big to come in and to consolidate. It is going to get tougher and tougher for the wine business in the sense that it's changing, and we all have to recalibrate our organizations to reflect consumer demand and also be more nimble. So I don't disagree with Dale that there is going to be consolidation that is coming.
I would say that consolidation is needed. I'd say the one thing that I didn't hear Dale talk about is capacity utilization. That basically every winery I speak to, when we talk about M&A, is expressing interest in brands that don't have a lot of physical assets tied to them. And they want something really cheap. And so there's this kind of gap between everyone wants the same thing. There's not a lot of it out there, and they want it cheap, which by virtue of the amount of demand for that kind of asset leads me to think that there might just be a little bit of difficulty in seeing these transactions come through, not to mention just the friction caused by family, the family ownership of wine businesses. I think if this does come out, it will probably, if we talk about a major transaction, it might be about assets, not whole companies. Companies that might be, large scale that are looking to get rid of some of their lower end brands and sell that way. I think it's bold because of that reason, that there is a lot of friction, and there's a reason we haven't seen those big transactions in the past. But there's a real need for it now, given the drop in demand and need for people to empty their tanks into a big brand that's performing well enough in the market.
And there's probably going to be a return, I see, to premiumization and what they call affordable luxury, which is important. So those companies that are looking to consolidate, or suppliers looking to buy big brands, are looking for those specific wine brands that are doing well in the premium category.
And I'm going to agree with Dale on this one as well. I think there are a number of mid-sized players out there that have solid portfolios, but they're really struggling due to changes in the distribution landscape. And in order to continue to be viable, they're going to need to team up with a larger player. And while this consolidation is going to be painful to some, I think it really paves the way for a stronger and more profitable industry going forward. So it's a necessary aspect of the current landscape that we're facing.
I've got to ask everyone here to pipe in on this one. From my perspective, I was a sales rep for 10 years back in Australia, which is probably very different to how it is here in the US. So what do you see as the implications of such a change? If we do see that aggregation at the top level, what are we likely to see as some of the challenges or the opportunities they're going to emerge in the market?
The first thing, and I just want to address a couple of things that were said there, and really great points from everybody. And I do think, kind of combining Philana and Bourcard's comments on premiumization moving up, and we're seeing the places we are seeing growth tend to be pretty appellation oriented. And as we see that happen, a lot of the assets that are out there, it's that people need to expand their footprint to maintain things like estate grown and to produce it in that specific appellation. And we're seeing a lot of activity that brings that into. So I think where those assets are plays a very, very big role in what that looks like. And certainly, a wine business that was built around 20 years ago of large production, just getting lines going, those days are gone. And so when we think about some of those assets, those are going to be something that's very difficult. A number of companies have those assets on their book, and those are going to be difficult for anybody to move on that. From an implication standpoint, I do think it is. It goes through the entire system. Who are those people that are really driving great prices? Who are those people who are really driving distributor portfolios, and who have the most influence with the wholesaler that then or influence with the retailer? So as you start looking at those, and for lack of a better term, the power shift on who is really influencing could take on a very, very different picture. And I think that's one of the big implications from this.
I think a lot of the implications are isolated to the companies involved. I think that if you're, maybe supplying grapes to a mid-sized winery, which, there is still demand for high-end assets out there, and there will be high prices paid. We saw that with the Duckhorn transaction, kind of resetting the market after a rather pessimistic view of wine assets following the sale prices of the vintage wine estate business in the bankruptcy. But if you're supplying to that company and there's a larger business acquiring it, they're going to want to move whatever grapes they have and their contracts into that business over time. They're going to want to transition that over to their distributors. But in general, I think a lot of this has to do kind of with profitability and filling in some portfolio gaps and achieving scale to create that profitability. I don't necessarily think it dramatically influences if I'm a company saying, how do I adjust my strategy based on this? Well, it depends whether or not you're selling, but in general, I don't think that the M&A is necessarily going to affect most smaller businesses or mid-sized businesses directly. But it certainly will affect the overall health of the industry and in particular the companies that would be involved in a transaction.
The wine industry itself is also very capital intensive. So it's about having financial patience as well. If you're moving at a fast pace and you're making decisions for your winery and you're going, and let's say you're being considered or going through an M&A process, I think it's very important for everyone to understand, especially getting into the wine industry or you want to buy into one or be a part of it, is it does take time to build brands, and it does take time. It is a capital intensive business, and there are definitely business models out there that other suppliers have shown that have also been very profitable. So that's important too. But we want to be able to make sure that you are marketing and selling a brand and a product that consumers want and desire.
Yeah, we've probably got time for one more comment. Just adding to that, Philana, I like the highlight, because as a new consumer, it's one of the things that we've always had as the starting products, like the Lancers Rosé and Bartles and James and those sorts of things. And with them, what's happening, we're losing some of those brands. They seem to be disappearing off the market. So I think there's that genuine interest in or opportunity in having something there that's going to bring people into the category. So before we move on to Philana's bold predictions, anyone want to add to the discussion? Excellent. I was going to say this. See, this is it. We've already solved this problem, so we know exactly what we're moving on to. Okay. All right. So the good news is I get the opportunity to hand over to Philana. Philana, tell us about your bold prediction for 2025.
In 2025, we are going to see a seismic shift with distribution and their internal structures and how they restructure, and it's going to happen across the board in terms of human resources, organizational frameworks, portfolio development, and composition. So we saw hints of this actually at the end of 2024, and you'll see major changes in 2025, and it will impact especially the small and mid-sized suppliers even more. It's going to create two things: one, huge challenges, and also opportunities. And here's why this is important, is because as we all are working towards making sure that we get more people into the wine business, distributors, along with restaurants and retailers, are all reframing their organizations and their companies to reflect the consumer demand. And why that's important is now more than ever, we have to come together as a wine industry to market wine than more than just alcohol. And I know I'll get into that a little bit later. It's important because when you're working with the wholesaler and they've decided to cut the tail, and they're also trying to destock their inventory levels, and they're changing their staffing, they're doing things differently in how they want to sell wine, how they want to sell fine wine, you have to be more nimble. And there's several different reasons why that's important, because it's about honing your digital strategy, getting smarter with your marketing, understanding what your brand story is, getting leaner with your team, and also hustling and getting in front of the customers. Selling wine is going to be very challenging, but if you're quick and fast and you can hustle, you can actually do very well in 2025. There are opportunities to this, but what's more important is to be able to make sure that we put wine in a positive message. And now you see more than ever, distributors are, in a lot of cases, shrinking their businesses in order to reflect what's going on in the marketplace. For every negative article that you see or irresponsible piece of journalism that talks about alcohol or wine, whatever it may be, is another job that's lost. It affects everybody. And so it's our responsibility to ensure that we understand our business, understand how to market our wines, and really hone in on digital strategy. Because of general consumer retail trends, saw online retail grow twice the pace of in-person. So that's why I mentioned digital retail and ensuring that we're able to reflect that in our businesses.
Okay, all right. So the Philana's looking at the changes happening across the board. I'm going to throw to our Rabobank analyst, Bourcard. What does that look like for you, based on Philana's prediction?
Well, I don't disagree at all. I think that the distributors, they have this reputation for being, wealthy and kind of indestructible. They've had a few tough years. I mean, especially I was going to talk about the inventory to sales ratio, which is basically how much product do you have in your warehouse versus how much are you selling on a given month. And this is kind of like a number that reflects kind of days on hand and inventory levels that are tracked by the Census Bureau. The average in inventory to sales ratio between 1992 and 2020 was 1.21. The highest point in the last 30 years, over that 30-year period, was 1.41, right? The current inventory to sales ratio is 1.65. It is just off the scale high. And a lot of distributors, have not only focus more towards spirits, which are a much more profitable category for them and a lot more sale of their business and a much more consolidated part of the business where they can get bullied much more than a winery can bully them on prioritization there. But they're trying to cut back on inventories, and they should actually be targeting, based on interest rates, below the historical averages because the cost of carrying the inventory is higher. And they're going to basically focus their sales efforts on brands that are large and profitable for them, and have contracts with penalties for underperformance and incentives for performing well. And so if you're a smaller brand that doesn't have leverage for one of those contracts, you're going to be strongly deprioritized. And to me, the thing to do about this is right back to what Philana said, which is work on your selling. Own your business's success, build a better sales team, and that's really expensive. And so my kind of recommendation would be build that sales team, but also that might mean you have to rationalize the markets you're targeting. Focus more on a few markets where you can sell and have a presence, and maybe do the same thing with your portfolio. Get rid of that longer tail, use kind of the strategy that distributors are using, and pick the brands you think can compete to win in this environment, and focus on the markets where you have the highest return on investment in that sales organization that you really is a competitive advantage in this down market, and with distributors not failing, but often giving very little effort to the smaller mid-sized brands.
Chris, I'd be interested in your perspective on that one. Given that you have a lot of contact from the first stage in the process, what are you hearing and seeing, and how does what Bourcard commented on add to your perspective?
So I think Bourcard is spot on with major changes in the distribution landscape. And the high inventories are due in part to retailers destocking, and the wholesalers are seeing a backup of inventory there. I'm not quite as concerned about the inventory to sales ratio we see, just because, I look at a historical average about 1.3, we're at about 1.6. So that's 1.3 months versus 1.6 months. So it's 0.3 months worth of excess inventory. I'm more concerned with the excess inventory at the winery level as opposed to the wholesalers, although it is a challenge. But I do really agree in this landscape where distributors are going to be prioritizing larger players, that the smaller players are going to have to be much more focused. You can't have a broad focus on going to distribute nationwide. Like Bourcard said, you really do have to pick those specific niches that you feel you have a competitive advantage in, and focus on them and spend time in the market and build that component of your sales, as opposed to the shotgun kind of approach.
And Dale, you're looking at the numbers at a granular level. What are you seeing, and how does this relate to what's been placed out there as the prediction by Philana?
This is a great subject, and on Chris's point, certainly inventory in the wine industry all the way back through the supply chain is definitely concerning. On Bourcard's point about where the inventory is, it's not only to me the level it's at; it's the length of time that we've been at that level. It's been like that for 2 years. So that to me is the other impact of that. From a wholesaler standpoint, the other thing I'd say is that, one thing that we've seen happen here is that with the introduction of canned wine cocktails and beatbox wine, buzz wine, the lines of what's beer, what's wine, and what's spirits is definitely blurring. And I know a number of wine companies have now started moving into the beer wholesaler network for convenience store coverage. And so when you start thinking about, there's going to be some of this route to market that's going to be very channel specific. If I've got a brand that's suitable for a convenience store, I'm going to go to a beer wholesaler. They've shown to be much better at delivering to that channel and doing that. So I think you're going to see a lot of wholesaler specialty come in. Philana's comment about digital is really important. And I think when you start thinking about fine wine, the on-premise plays a very, very big role in that, obviously. And the sales cycle in the on-premise is very long, right? You're not, if you send a salesperson into an on-premise account, you're not necessarily going to impact it that week. It's a longer sales cycle. That person also, they're cutting back on their labor. They don't want to see a sales rep. So as you start seeing it, that digital application is working well, and it's working well certainly for the proprietor, the on-premise operator, and in some cases, a independent retailer. It's also working well for the wholesaler. May not be working that great for the supplier, and I think that's what we have to think about. I do think some different business models will emerge out of this, and I think it very well could be that we will see a large traditional beer wholesaler come into the marketplace who might start taking more and start buying some of these. I also think a model like LibDib is very interesting, right? That's something that's gone a very different route. So I think you're going to see a lot of change there. Change in this area has been slower, not fast. There's not a lot of huge acquisitions, not a whole lot left out there. So we'll see where it goes. But I think it's a really important subject.
And I actually do appreciate everyone's comments, because if you think about a mid or small size supplier, Domain Estates is one. We've had to hustle and get in front of the customer and move as quickly as possible to buck trends. And I think it's important because it's not doom and gloom out there. You can actually achieve and get the attention of the wholesaler if you come prepared with everything intact and you have 3 strong points that you want to make with your brands, and you come in with a clear plan, and you have a team that is aggressive, that's getting out there, and you're honing in your digital strategy, and also working with the wine industry together to ensure that fine wine is in a place that people are able to enjoy such a fantastic beverage, and that it is a good thing and it has great benefits. And all of these things are important. I'm a staunch supporter. I'm an advocate. I have to say this, and I'm going to continue to say this. And although, yes, of course, the prediction is distributors are going to make significant seismic shifts to their operations, and we got to be able to be flexible and attend to that. But what's even more important, and this is a statement, is really being able to come together and market wine more than just alcohol. I cannot say that more than enough, because it does affect everyone. So it's important that we come together as an industry, as we always have, and to ensure that wine is in a good place. My last point too, and I want to just make this point, Dale, you do say something about the RTDs and also the non-alc brands that are coming out, which, there's going to be great innovation that's going to come out this year. But also we need to keep in mind that takes away from spirit share. And when that takes away from spirit share, that is one of the reasons why distributors are recalibrating, because the majority of their margins are also made on spirits. So it's something to keep in mind.
I would just, this is a quick comment, Damien, so you don't get stressed out about time. But my favorite quote from all of the research I did last year came from an executive at one of the larger distributors. and this is to Philana's point, who said, your job as a smaller brand, is to hijack my salespeople. You have to trick them into selling your product because I'm giving them targets and incentives and clear goals to, the top 20 suppliers in our portfolio. You need to be on the ground in person working with your distributor to make them care. And, that just takes resources, and it comes back to focusing on a few markets where you think you can succeed and have good partnerships and win over those people in a way that makes them focus on your brand when they literally have incentives telling them to do something else. So I think that's kind of does a good job of identifying just what your job is when it comes to working with distributors as those smaller and mid-sized brands.
And before we throw on, I know, Dale, I'll give you a second. I was going to say I'll give Philana a chance to retort after you've mentioned, and then we're going to move on to Chris.
So I do think in Philana, there's no question that different products take away from different areas, right? And yes, probably, and certainly the canned cocktail category is taking more from spirits. However, it's taken away wine occasions, and it takes away, right? And again, I think you have to think about every occasion, and you have to compete for every occasion. And any noise in that increases your chance of losing that occasion from a customer standpoint. And I think that does get back to your comment on we got to promote wine. We've got to figure out what brand wine, not individual brands, but why wine is the go-to category. And I think that's something that we need to make sure we get to. And I think we'll have a discussion on that later.
Which is why digital is so important, is to be able to get it in front of people's faces as soon as possible.
Okay, thanks for that, Philana, and panel for a great discussion. I think there's a lot of opportunities that have been highlighted there, and I'm recognizing that as things are changing, those opportunities will come up. So let's see how we're going to deal with that, and how Dr. Chris Bitter's example of a bold prediction. I'm in the wrong podcast today. The bold prediction from Chris Bitter. Tell us what you're seeing is happening in the next year in the wine industry, Chris.
So my bold prediction is that following 3 consecutive years of decline, premium and luxury wine sales are going to return to the black in 2025. So more specifically, so that we can evaluate whether I'm right next year, I'm saying that off-premise sales in the $15 and over category, as measured by Nielsen IQ, will be higher in 2025 than they were in 2024. So I have 2 main reasons for my optimism here. And first is that I believe that a large part of the decline in recent years was due to the unwinding of pandemic-related distortions that pushed wine sales or premium and luxury wine sales to unsustainable levels. And after the drop over the last several years, I think we're back to more normal kind of levels. So the comparisons are going to be more realistic that we're facing in 2025. Secondly, high inflation and weak consumer sentiment have been a drag on spending on discretionary and luxury items, including premium and luxury wine. And while there's a lot of uncertainty about the economic forecast right now, our base case scenario is that inflation is going to continue to gradually abate in 2025, and consumer sentiment is going to improve. So these factors should be less of a drag on premium luxury sales as well. So obviously, this is going to be good news for premium and luxury suppliers because it sets the stage for shipments to recover as well. But it's also good for the broader industry. So ultimately, it's retail sales that drive the whole value chain, including all the way down to bulk wine sales and grape sales. So I think even a modest increase, and I'm not expecting a sharp rebound in sales, but even a modest increase is going to change the psychology in the industry and should help to alleviate some of this decision-making paralysis that's gripped the industry over the last couple of years. So hopefully, in turn, this will stimulate more bulk wine sales, more grape contracting activity, and ultimately vineyard transactions. And this is particularly true in the coastal regions that are producing for the premium and luxury segments of the market. Now, I do want to close by saying that this is my base case scenario. It's far from a certainty, because there's so much uncertainty in the economic backdrop right now. So we have a new administration coming into office. They have very different policy priorities, and we just don't know for sure how that's going to play out at this point. So I think wineries are really going to need to be prepared to respond to a range of scenarios and potential outcomes in 2025, because this kind of rebound in premium luxury is certainly not assured.
I'll throw to you, Bourcard. I just wanted to add in, I'm really looking forward to next year's event, Chris, because you've mentioned where the data's coming from, where it is, and how much it's going to change. And so all of a sudden I'm going, cool, when we assess this next year, we're going to be able to put up a slide and say, this is what he said, and this is how it went. I'm looking forward to that. So, Bourcard?
I appreciate Chris so much for putting forward what I think is the boldest prediction among the three of us. That I think that it is a very optimistic view for there to return to growth in that 15 plus segment. I don't say this to be a pessimist. I know that we want to support the category and whatnot. But I am always concerned, and I'm actually writing about this now, about planning for growth for your business when it's probably not going to happen. We've been doing this over and over again, that every industry analyst has said over and over again, oh, we bottomed out. And 6 months later, they're like, oh, we see evidence that we bottomed out and things will get better soon. And it just hasn't happened again. I think that it's going to be very, very hard to return to growth in that segment. I think that we've been basically having the best case scenario in terms of economic performance for so long. There's only downside risk there, not to mention the public health concerns that are coming from the media, as well as public health officials. And in general, I think that requires companies to be more careful in their forecasting and their resource planning, to decouple perhaps the targets that they have. So saying like, how much should I give my salespeople as a sales target, and their marketing people, what is their objectives? They can still be aggressive, but supply to a much more pessimistic scenario. Because of the bulk market, you can go out and fill in the gaps. The bulk wine prices, you can fill in the gaps where needed. So I would say that even if you're optimistic, supply to a pessimistic scenario, so that we don't exacerbate the supply situation that we have across almost every winery that I've spoken with over the last 2 or 3 years.
And I'll just add one more point to my prediction. So I'm saying at the retail level too, that we'll see this improvement in sales, but there's going to be a lag before wineries feel the effects on shipments because of this inventory overhang that we've already talked about as well. So and I agree with you, Bourcard, that you still need to have a cautious outlook for 2025. But I do see the bottom is nearing, and I think that this is the first step, is to see some improvement at the retail level, and I do believe we'll see it.
I think it's important.
Go ahead, Philana.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's important to recognize it has to get better. The premium side has to get better. I think that's really an important point to make. And you actually are seeing a shift with the independent retail and their interest in bringing in more premium and luxury branded wines and spirits and getting the customer into the store. And I think that's important. And you're going to start seeing that shift. And, I appreciate Bourcard's point as well. You have to be optimistic but cautious, but take a risk as well, because it needs to come back. It actually needs to come back. That's my view on it.
I think it's very interesting, Chris. And I was going to say that we're having a bit of a love fest here with everybody agreeing with everybody. So I'm with Bourcard, and I don't think there's any question it's going to improve. But a lot of the improvement we're seeing in the areas we're seeing wine trends improve is that the bottom end isn't sinking as fast as it was. That the low end is actually stabilizing. I do think also this is going to bring in, when I think about varietal type wine color we're seeing white wines dramatically outperform red wines, and that's been going on a while. That plays out very well for this time, for this price tier, for that 15 to 25 price tier. That plays very, very well for that. As that I think it's easier to buy a good high quality white wine at $20 than it is a good quality red wine at $20. I also think that as we think about you're using Nielsen as your measurement, and way too data geek here. Those brands are hard coded in there, right? If you were to go with actually not hard coding items, I think you're going to see a lot of brands that were selling for over $25 because of supply are going to be selling for under that $25. So question is also, will it grow? Yeah, I don't think it's going to get back to growth. I think it will improve. But we've got a long road to go here before we really get back to growth. And I do think supply is going to play a role on that. There's a lot of really, really good wines out there that are being discounted. The appellations that I'm seeing at my local Trader Joe's for $20 are pretty scary right now. So good prediction. I'll go on the other side. I don't think we're going to get back to growth in that area.
I would say that is a big one, Dale. I've been speaking to some wineries who, in that, they were $16, $17 before, they moved up to $25. They're moving back down to 20, right? And so they're still keeping a lot of the price increases from the past years, but realizing that they would rather have the volumes and the efficiency rather than the margin on a much smaller base. And so that is a big determinant of whether or not we'll see volume growth, but that we should decouple that from dollar sales growth as well. That might be an important differentiation. It'll probably be about the same, actually. But
and again, I'll say it all goes back to your digital and marketing strategy and how you market and sell your wines. The U.S. will always be one of the best places to market and sell wines. And there are so many fantastic European producers that love to have their wines marketed and sold in the US. And so many global producers that want to be here. And so it is actually our responsibility in working with retailers, using data for good, educating your retailers and educating the consumer and ensuring that wine has a place, not only in premium and luxury, but also casual price points. We can all still win.
I tend to agree on that as well, but I was going to say one of the points and one of the issues that comes up to me with this prediction, Chris, if it pays out, I want to know where the customers are coming from, because in the entry categories below the price points you're talking about, we've also seen quite serious declines going back 10 years. So how are we getting those consumers in to work their way and trade their way up the channel?
So I would say, going back to my two main reasons, some of what we've seen in this decline is basically normalization because sales, rose to these unsustainable levels. But the second aspect is that we're going to see inflation improving and we're going to see consumer sentiment improving. So we're going to see some folks trading up from the lower price tiers into $15 and up. So these are not necessarily new consumers coming into the market in 2025, but consumers are going to be feeling a little better about spending a little bit more on wine than they did in 2023, 2022, or even this year because of this improving sentiment and inflation abating. And things are just going to look a little bit better from the perspective of the consumer, and they're going to open up their pocketbooks a little bit. So that's basically where I see this coming from. So this isn't necessarily a good thing for the lower tiers of the market, but I do see a shift back to $15 and up.
And I think it's a very good point to talk about comps here, because you may be screaming the sky is falling because we had poor performance of the $15+ category for 2 or 3 years in a row. But if you look at comparing to pre-pandemic levels, we're still good, right? We haven't lost meaningful volumes if you compare to that level. I think we just perhaps made the mistake of projecting forward these unsustainable growth levels, which contributed to some of the oversupply problems we're facing. But the category, like if we compare back to those periods, it's volume wise pretty good. The cost environment is not as good, and that's where all the pain comes from. But I think that's a very good point to remind people that 2020, 2021 were aberrations, really.
And Chris, I think you talk about inflation abating. We cross our fingers. I think that's going to be a help. Tariff, if tariffs do come to be, probably not necessarily going to hit this price category that hard when you think about the origins of a lot of those wines. So I think that also plays a role. So I think there is reasons to hope for the best here. I'm excited for next year as well.
And I'll add one last thing. While this is far from assured, if anybody has looked at their 401k at the end of the year, it probably gained a lot in value. So we had a really good year for stocks. Again, that doesn't mean that we're going to have another good year this year, but I think seeing that, folks are going to feel a little bit better about spending on a little bit higher quality wine this year as well.
Okay, and that's I was going to say a good note. Looking at that silver lining, Chris. I like the approach, and let's move on and see if there's another silver lining with Bourcard's prediction. Bourcard, what is your bold prediction for 2025?
Oh God, I feel like this is a very touchy and controversial subject, and I just want to preface what I'm going to say by stating that it's intentionally a little controversial. Not necessarily the actual prediction, but how I feel that industry should respond to it. So it's kind of designed to be a little, against the grain. But my prediction is linked to the public health and CDC dietary guidelines. And that's going to happen at the end of the year. We're going to have new guidelines for recommended alcohol use by the end of the year. And my prediction is that current recommendations ask consumers to limit alcohol consumptions to 2 drinks a day for men, 1 drink a day for women, and I think also 1 drink a day for people over 65, though that's not going to be a factor here. I think the 2025 or the updated guidelines will simply recommend all consumers limit alcohol consumption to 1 drink a day, which is, I think, much better than I think a lot of the more pessimistic, perhaps frightful takes from the industry, and probably much higher than a lot of the most ardent advocates for alcohol control. I think that the big question for me is, what should you as a winery do about this? And my controversial answer is nothing. I don't think that this is something that you as a winery can influence directly. I mean, sure, send a letter to your representative. That's not actually a meaningful amount of time. But I think this is more than anything a distraction from what wineries need to be doing, which is building brands and aren't necessarily tied to that halo of healthfulness, right? I think brands tend to lean into inherent attributes like healthfulness in the category. And by the very nature of inherent attributes, it's a shared kind of attribute that every product in the category has. And it will not help yourself outperform the market or differentiate yourself. And so if you want to outperform the market, you need to take that halo off, grow some horns, and do something more interesting. I think a great example is Liquid Death, a water category that is only about refreshment, that is only about healthy, low calorie, nothing. And then a brand comes in that's all about hard rock marketing, putting money behind the brand and getting people's attention. And so I think my kind of whole thing about this is, you can't control that as a winery. You need to think about getting ways to get people's attention and living in a world where that health halo isn't going to differentiate you. And it probably never did, not meaningfully anyways. And so my thing is focus back on that marketing. Don't think about this, figure out ways to get consumers excited, do innovative things that doesn't look like what other wineries are doing. And that's the only way that you can outperform the market. and get back to growth for yourself, even if the industry is flat.
Okay, so in light of this sign of prescience from Bourcard and some of the issues that we're going to face, I'll call on Philana to take the first chance at a retort.
I agree and disagree, because here's the thing. According to IWSR data, the growth of non-alcoholic categories is expected to grow by $4 billion by 2028. It will affect wine. So yes, in some aspects, don't let the noise get in the way of your ability to market and sell your wines and your brand, and own that and hone that strategy. But it's also important to know that the competition is much different and is a different landscape, because the shelf can only hold so many brands. And you're going to see it across the country and in grocery and also in the way that younger consumers are experiencing wine. And the non-alc movement is definitely something that we need to be aware of. And also, understandably so, with the health concerns. I do think there's also some really good things that are going to come out of it. There is going to be some great innovation. There was a fantastic article that was actually written by a girlfriend of mine, Emily Saldino, in the Washington Post. And her thing was, if dry January is not too daunting, try drinking less but better. So those things are also good. And ensuring that people are drinking higher quality wines. It doesn't have to be, the lower end and the casual price point wines, but moving up to premium price points. So it gives way for more innovation and for better options for people as they want to get healthier. But I do think it's important to keep in mind, you've got to know your competition. There is a lot of non-alc brands that are coming and hitting the shelves hard right now. And it only takes away from market share and share of mind from the distributors and also from the marketplace and the consumer. It's important to know that competition.
So I'm going to go with the agree and disagree as well, Philana. So, Bourcard, I don't think there's any question that they're going to have to change. Very bold of you to actually predict exactly what the guidelines will be. That is such a wild card. But they're going to change. I just don't see how there's not going to be a change. Second thing that I would say is, I'm going to disagree with your second part, in that small wineries, everyone, we all have to do something. Now, as an individual winery, you shouldn't be doing that. But what we should be doing is enabling those who are targeted to go do this. California Wine Institute, Wine America, FIBS, there is a group, there are lobbying groups out there that this is what they are there for. We need to support them. And I think about this, like if you've ever, the other thing we know is that in 5 years, we're going to do this again. And, if you've ever planned an annual event and that event's happening every year, you start your planning for that event the day after you finish this year's, you start planning next year's. I'd say it's the same situation. We need to start thinking about 5 years from now, because the World Health Organization isn't going to go anywhere. They're still going to be doing what they're doing. They're still going to be driving at that. And we as an industry, this isn't just the wine industry. This is the beverage alcohol industry. This is the adult beverage industry. We need to unify around this and make sure that the science that is being done and the results of science are in fact actually getting out there, and every winery needs to contribute to that via a lobbying organization. So that's my agree to disagree with you on that one, Bourcard.
And I'm going to agree with Bourcard. I do think there's going to be, so I'll agree that I think there's going to be a change in the guidelines, but I don't know that it's specifically going to be one drink a day. But I do think there will be a change from the current guidelines. And so in a way, this is perhaps the biggest threat to wine, in my view, is these changing attitudes toward alcohol. But I also think there's some potential opportunity here, and again, more for the premium and luxury segments of the market. And for one, I think wine does have an argument that it may be the best choice among alcoholic beverages that consumers may not know at this point. Now, I'm not saying it's a health food, because I don't think it is, but I think in moderation, wine can be a part of a healthy lifestyle. more so than competing alcoholic beverages. So the industry has an opportunity to make this case. And I know this is difficult in terms of what you can say about health benefits and things like that, but I think there is an opportunity there. And then at the individual winery level, and this has already been mentioned, the low alc, no alc categories, the better for you categories, we're talking kind of a broader shift toward being more health conscious. I think those are all areas of opportunity for wineries to be looking at as a potential way to expand the portfolio and kind of embrace this growing health consciousness among Americans that might be pushed along by organizations and dietary guidelines and WHO and others like that. So I think it's something that's coming. It's not going away. We're not going back to where things were. We're going to continue to have this discussion. And we just need to find a way as an industry and individual wineries to capitalize on it and make the most of the opportunities that it presents.
And I think you're Chris, and well, just everyone, leave it to the lobbyist, I guess, and maybe don't do anything. Maybe you should, join the Wine Institute or whatever lobbying group you want, But I also think it's you Chris say it's the biggest risk for the wine business right now. I think that there is an argument to make that the wine industry is more subject to change here than other alcohol categories because it has that halo. More people think that drinking wine is healthy than people that drink wine and spirits, right? If you tell me that whiskey I'm drinking is bad for me, I'll be like, duh, leave me alone. Like, I'm just trying to chill. Whereas you say that to wine, it actually changes my mind about my perspective of that category. So it's probably more susceptible to this than other categories are. But I think there's an off-cited statistic from Gallup earlier this year that 40% of US consumers think that moderate or small amounts of alcohol consumption are bad for you. And that's doubled over the last 20 years, the number of people that feel that way. What wasn't as well covered in that survey was they then asked, all the respondents, do you really care? And more than 85% of them said no, essentially that like, yes, I know it's not good for me, but I already knew that. And so I'm not really going to change my behavior because like I've already accepted a certain amount of risk. And so I think people already have a lot of these perspectives are built in. And so the changes from the public health community probably is going to have a really small effect. And even the Surgeon General's warning, adding a third thing to the Surgeon General's warning, to me, it's like, yeah, the industry is going to fight it. And that's probably the optimal thing for them to do. But like, okay, the Surgeon General warning says one, like this, don't drink while pregnant. 2, don't drink and drive. And 3, maybe linked to some form of cancer. Like, I don't think that meaningfully changes the way that people like drink. If they change the label, so it's like 45%, warning label, then totally different story. But the actual implementation of these things, I think, are much more marginal than the industry makes it out to be. And that's not to say that you shouldn't do anything. It's just to say that, it's a more of a hopeful message saying like, yeah, it probably isn't as big a factor as it's made out to be in some cases.
So I do disagree with that to some extent. And starting with the first proposition that consumers think that wine is healthier, so it has more to lose. I think if you ask the younger generations what the healthiest alcoholic beverage is, they're going to say White Claw or something like that because they see, no added sugar and 90 calories or whatever it is. So the older generations who grew up with the French paradox might feel that wine is healthier, but I think we have less to lose among them and they're more set in their ways. It's these younger generations where we have an opportunity with. And I do think it is potentially a bigger impact, not just because the dietary guidelines are changing, but because of all the negative press that's going to come out surrounding them about the health benefits. I'm not sure that anybody's going to read the guidelines themselves. And so I do think that there's a potential here that we really have to find a way to confront because it is potentially damaging to wine consumption.
It is because we have to mobilize as an industry and really come together to better educate the consumer. And I'm gonna read a quote from the original wine influencer, which is Robert Mondavi. I'm sure everyone recognizes this quote. Wine has been with us since the beginning of civilization. It is the temperate, civilized, sacred, romantic mealtime beverage recommended in the Bible. Wine has been praised for centuries by statesmen, philosophers, poets, and scholars. Wine in moderation is an integral part of our culture, heritage, and gracious way of life. We have to do a better job as an industry to lobby and to protect this industry and to protect the wine business and the spirits business, alcohol, beverage in general, across the board, because it does affect everybody. For every negative piece of press that you see out there that is unfounded and false and doesn't really have the correct data and research is another job that is lost in our industry. And it is important. So yes, don't get involved with all the noise, but it is important that we become proactive and get ahead of it as well.
I do think, and just to wrap it up, Craig, I do think that there is not one single thing that is causing our headwinds in this category. It's a series of small things, and this is just another little thing that isn't going to help. And 85% don't think it's going to. That means 15% do, and you can 15% yourself to death, and that's just what we have to watch out as an industry.
Okay, look, thanks very much for the detailed discussion, and I think it's a great topic to have finished on. I'm not going to add to it, but I will point out, as a scientist, one of the easiest things to do is to critique science, and we know very well in the misinformation age that we're living in at the moment, all you need to do is cast doubt on something, because all scientists also know is there is no such thing as perfect research. It doesn't matter what approach you take, it doesn't matter what data you use, there are always limitations to it, and people always find holes in it. So there is certainly a scope from both sides of the argument. So I remember reading a book by Tony Edwards called The Good News About Booze, where it was a compilation of all of this research about how alcohol had benefits for you, which of course is always discredited by people who are arguing for temperance. So I want to leave that as kind of the last word. And whilst you're all sitting there in your seats, happily thinking we've debated a great topic, now it's time to turn the attention over to you to go back and review what you all said last year and hold that candle underneath your feet and say, so how did this all go? So now we know that we're expecting a prediction of one standard drink a day instead of the distinction that we're drinking two if you're male and one if you're female. There's certainly an exhibit of equality for us all. I want to conclude our predictions for this year and use the remaining time that we have to see just how many of you end up breaking into a cold sweat by holding you accountable for the things that you said last year. So for the sake of time, we'll have to move quickly through these, but I still want to leave room for some discussion on each topic. So using the same order as the first part, Dale, I'm putting you into the fire first. Last year, you predicted the number of wineries in the US would decline for the first time in living memory. How close were you on this one?
Yeah, and boy, there's times when you're really excited about being right about one, and there's times when you're not excited about being right about ones. And while we don't have the definitive numbers yet, we're going to be right on this one, and that the number of wineries is going to decrease. And that kind of goes back to our earlier session about assets that are there. Where are they? So that will hold to be true, that there are fewer wineries, and that as the market changes, there's likely to continue to be fewer.
Okay, I was going to say it is one of those unfortunate predictions. Damn, I was right. And so yeah, we're yet to see the numbers. Did anyone want to comment on the topic or the finding as such? Otherwise, shall we move straight through to the next prediction?
I just thought Dale was wrong. That I thought that it was, the winery owners aren't rational, and would avoid that for longer than they have. But it does look like he's right, or was right, unfortunately.
All right, so moving right along, I hate just being the messenger in this situation. Let's turn things over to Philana. So for your prediction last year was that a lot of brands will be switching distributors in 2024, or a lot more than usual. How did you go on that, Dawn?
I know I was right because a lot of suppliers did switch distributors, and here's the thing: sometimes the grass is not greener, because distribution is changing, and they're recalibrating their organization and their forces and how they sell wine. And it's important to note that, yeah, you can change your distributor and think that you're going to get the sales better, or depletions are going to grow, or you'll increase your shipments. However, at the end, it's still about your sales team and honing in your strategies and making sure that you're nimble and you hustle in front of the customer. You can collect as much data as you want. You can immerse yourself in all the data. But at the end of the day, the decision always comes down when it comes to a sales team, your gut instinct and getting out in front of the customer as soon as possible. Unfortunately, we did see a lot of suppliers, and maybe that's a good thing and a bad thing, depending on how you look at it, moving from one distributor to the next, thinking that it's that short-term gain, but you got to look at the long-term view. And it's better to partner with a wholesaler that has a national strategy that is able to really get close to you and understand what you're doing and making sure that you are their priority. That's the most important, is making sure that you deliver to the distributor something that they can get excited about. So moving doesn't always solve all your sales issues.
Bourcard?
It nailed this one. There was. I wrote a report on this second half of last year. One of the strategy people, distribution strategy people at a large winery told me, brands smell blood in the water. And so, there was a lot of competition between distributors to win business, desperately at times, and sometimes just competitively rather than economically minded decisions were being made. And it's led to, maybe some very favorable contracts for the suppliers that switched, but maybe those more, extractive contracts will come back to bite them when those relationships deteriorate over time. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. But definitely would agree with Philana. Don't lose sight of what you need to do well, which is sell your own brands well.
Great point, Philana. I think you're right. There's always going to be a certain amount of churn. I do think, we mentioned and just what you talked about, how do you work well with others and how do you build that strategy? And I think in every aspect of our business right now, there's a contract for everything. And if you're approaching your situation from the standpoint of, I have a contract and you need to go do this, that's probably going to be short term. And that realistically, the people that you have contracts with, whether it be wineries and growers, whether it be wineries and wholesalers, your better approach is really to come in and say, okay, hey, this is our contract. Let's take a look at this. And how do we figure out in these rough times how we both can win without getting too lost in the language of that contract? We think that those are the people that are really going to survive long term and do best.
Excellent. Okay, so we're seeing them gone through two predictions. Had a discussion and looking at the implications. Basically, relationships matter in the wine industry. I think that's a keen. That's what's coming through to me. So let's move on to Chris. Your prediction from last year was that California bearing wine grape acreage will decline by at least 10,000 acres in 2024. How did you go on that one?
So this is, like Dale said, not necessarily a prediction that is a happy prediction, but I do think it was correct. Now, we don't have good data on acreage removals in this state of California, but I did speak with Jeff Bitter of Allied Grape Growers, who is the reigning expert on California grape acreage. And he's just now preparing his estimate for the reduction in acreage in 2024. In his preliminary estimate is between 15,000 and 20,000 acre net reduction in bearing acreage. So I think I'm comfortably within the margin for error there, being correct on this. And I'll just say, while this is obviously painful to those who had to remove acreage, particularly because there are not a lot of viable alternative uses in many areas, it is a step toward healing in the grape market in terms of bringing supply and demand back into balance. So in that sense, it is a positive that we're seeing some of this acreage removed, because each acre that goes, and particularly in the areas producing for the under $10 segments of the market, each acre that we see goes brings us a little bit closer to having a balanced market in the future.
I do think it'll be interesting, Chris, to see where those acres were pulled. So I think that's another part of the story. It's not just the macro number, but the locations of where those vineyards were pulled. Just as we drive around, we're seeing more and more vineyards kind of sit fallow for 2-3 years, and that's going to be an interesting play.
Yeah, I think the not just where it's where things have come from, but also from a consumer's perspective, they're looking at it. It both reduces the degree of competition and the pressures on supply to the market. So we might actually see some more of those positive outcomes, or at least we can hope so. And looking forward to, as a consumer, how that might look for them. So. Without wanting to dwell on any particular topic, I wanted them throw over and give an opportunity to Bourcard. Bourcard, your prediction from last year was that wine prices will be lower in 2024 than they were in 2023. How did that work out?
So I was wrong. The last in print from the Bureau of Labor Statistics and the CPI, Consumer Price Index, had wine at home at 0.2% year-on-year growth in value. Now, luckily for me, I technically misspoke when I made that prediction. I said that the wine prices would be disinflationary, which disinflation, contrary to deflation, actually means just no inflation, which is basically saying we'll have inflation rates lower than, I guess, the central bank would like, below their target, which is disinflation. So I technically was right, but what I meant to say was deflation, in which case I was actually wrong. And when we talk about like the current market we're entering with like a lot of bulk wine out there, and there's going to be real pressure on prices to come down to drive demand. I actually think in 20 years, we're going to look back on this as kind of a blessing in disguise, because we keep talking about young consumers needing, to win over younger consumers. And what are younger consumers but poor people that just don't have a lot of money? And so if we see better quality wine with innovative branding, because wineries are actually trying to win consumers over rather than just leaning on whatever they've always done, and lower prices, it is a pretty convincing way to bring new people into the category, especially those, younger people who don't have the money to buy that $30 bottle of wine and never really have.
Spoken like a true economist. I was going to say that's a great response, Bourcard. Okay, I'll throw it over to the panel before we close things out, or get to some of those concluding remarks. Dale.
Thank you for the great discussion. I think this was really well organized, Damien. Love the approach. Love where we went. Can't wait to see next year and see how we all did on our projections. So thank you very much, and hope everybody has a great 2025. Best wishes.
Excellent. I'll give everyone a chance to have their final say on the discussion. Philana, how did you want to close things out for this year?
Well, I always look forward to this discussion, and we have so many fantastic, smart people in this industry. And I am very, very confident and have no doubt in my mind that together, you're always better together. And to have a coalition and to enforce stronger messaging around the beverage alcohol business and the wine industry in particular, as well as fine wine, is so critically important right now in every way. And understanding your business and getting out there and hustling and getting in front and accelerating. It's about getting to market as fast as possible and getting as close to your wholesaler and your distributor partner as much as possible. I think this is, this comes up every day with our sales teams. The grass is not always greener. You have to work with your partner and be the best partner that you can be for your wholesaler, and also for the teams, and also for the customers, and be there for the customers and for the accounts and the retailers. It's the time to get to increase your business in a way that you've never done before. And it inspires innovation. And so I'm very, very excited for 2025. And I look forward to this business turning around as well.
Okay, thanks for that, Philana. And your final words, Bourcard?
Yeah, you said no self-promotion, right? Does that apply to us?
No, it doesn't. You can plug away. Go nuts.
All right. Even though I would actually question whether people actually want to hear me say this, and therefore would hurt the chances of people listening to what I say, I would recommend listening to the podcast we put out as a research team called Liquid Assets. I work for a bank. We write about beverages. You can't name the podcast anything else. So it's Liquid Assets. It's wherever you want to get it. We also have a research website where you can access our reports. It's knowledge.rabobank.com. You can look that up and sign up to access the research, or at least get permission And my final message to the industry is, work hard out there. It's not going to be an easy year, even if it's not going to be as bad as last year. And I would really come back to decoupling your forecasting and your supply planning from the targets you're setting for your sales and marketing people. I think that you really want to be very, very disciplined to set yourself up for future success. Pivot, stretch yourself a little bit if things turns out better than expected, but really plan around that flat to downside scenario so that you aren't compromising your future ability to navigate the market when times get better.
Okay, thanks, Bourcard. I appreciated the plug too, as I'm sure they will at the podcast. And finally, Chris, what are your final words on the session?
I would say my final words are that everybody needs to focus on embracing the challenges that we're facing today. And I know we don't want challenges in our way, but find the ways to make the best of them. So if we're talking about changing attitudes toward alcohol and more health consciousness, focus on those products that will make consumers feel better about choosing wine, whether it's low alc, no alc, better for you. For things like competition, look at new areas, even if it's not a traditional style of wine, to compete against canned cocktails. We have wine-based cocktails. Just think a little bit outside the box. When we talk about the younger generations who are more diverse, you have to embrace that in terms of making your marketing messages more inclusive. So look at each one of these opportunities and figure out ways that you can try to turn it into an opportunity as opposed to a threat to you. And I know that's not always easy, but it's going to be a challenging environment, and wineries are going to have to really kind of think a little bit outside of the box going forward.
Thanks very much for that, Chris. And I think they're great words to conclude with. And so thanks everyone on the panel. I'm such an erudite group of people predicting what's going to happen in the year. I hope everyone's enjoyed the presentation, the discussion, and certainly we've appreciated the comments that have turned up in the chat box. So here's what I heard today. Just to lead out, close out things, we've seen the prediction that mergers at the top end are likely to create an opportunity for a new category to emerge to attract new consumers to wine. Distribution and consumer demand changes are likely to create widespread opportunities, leaving it more to the producer to be responsible for driving demand for their wines in the market. And turning the corner for affordable luxury to premium wine categories at retail in response to reduced inflationary pressures. And finally, all in light of the Surgeon General to change the alcohol drinking recommendations from a disparate 1.5 per person per day now to 1 per person per day. So what's this all going to play out? What's it going to look like in 12 months? Well, I look forward to seeing you all back here. And I know for sure we're going to be teaching exactly this sort of thing at Sonoma State University at the Wine Business Institute. I'm Damien Wilson. I'm the Hamill Family Chair there. It's been a great episode. And to close things out, thanks very much, everyone. Look forward to seeing you next year. We appreciate all of your interest in our bold predictions. Over to you, George.
Well, thank you, Damien. That was terrific. And obviously, I want to thank Dale, Chris, Philana, and Bourcard for taking the time to help us put together this terrific webinar. I thought it was great, and I hope those of you in the audience enjoyed it as well. Once again, I want to thank Moss Adams, our series presenting sponsor, for their support, as well as Protea Financial, our series supporting sponsor. It's the support of those sponsors that allow us to continue to produce these educational webinars and broadcast them for free for our wine industry audience. And once again, I want to thank everyone in the audience for joining us. If you like this webinar, go ahead and like our YouTube channel, and we'll continue to keep you posted on upcoming webinars in the future.